Okay, I think in the interest of time, and we have 4 great speakers, I think we should get started. So good morning to everyone on the West Coast and everybody who's a bit further east. Good afternoon. My name is Nina Bado, and I'm currently managing Foresight's WaterNEXT program. And I welcome you to today's industry matchmaking session with a focus on circular water in the built environment sector. Next slide. Before we get started, I would like to first acknowledge with gratitude and respect that the lands on which Foresight operates are the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people. I myself am calling in from the unceded traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nation, which is known as Vancouver. And before I give you a short introduction of Foresight, I would like to ask the participants to put their name and company in the chat, just that your fellow participants know who else is on the call, that the panelists get a bit of an overview, and just to break the ice for the Q&A later. And I think with that, we can go to the next slide. Yes. So Foresight is, our mission is really to help the world to do more with less sustainably. We are Canada's largest clean tech innovation and adoption accelerator, and we help de-risk and simplify the adoption of the public and private sector of some of the best cleanest technologies. Next slide. One of our oldest and most well-established clusters or sector programs is our WaterNEXT program. It's Canada's largest water technology network. And with this network, we bring together stakeholders from across the water innovation ecosystem to increase the adoption of market-ready solutions for some of the world's most pressing water challenges. Next slide. We envision Canada to be one of the best places in the world to develop and commercialize water technology solutions and innovation, and to serve some of the most pressing challenges that we see nowadays. Our goal is to help Canada achieve less than 10% municipal and industrial water loss by 2033, and we call this our under 10 in 10 promise. And we're well aware that this is a very ambitious goal, but we believe that Canada has a very good water tech ecosystem. And I think today's is a proof of the innovation that comes out of the Canadian ecosystem. How do we do all this work? We have acceleration programs that support water tech innovators. We do sessions like today, connecting innovators to industry. Then we have investor matchmaking sessions, innovative partnerships with partners like Xylem, WaterSmart, who's part of the session today as well, NRC IRAP, and then international partners like the Dutch Water Alliance and the International Clean Tech Network. We engage stakeholders across the water's space, but also in other sectors. As you're well aware, water touches almost everything, and we identify opportunities to showcase Canadian water tech. Next slide. Today's session is supported by the National Research Council of Canada, the Industrial Research Assistant Program that provides advice, connections, and funding to help Canadian small and medium-sized businesses to increase their innovation capacity and take ideas to market. We really appreciate the support of NRC IRAP, and we're excited that we can do this in collaboration with them. And I see, at least I see Cliff is here. Cliff, would you like to say a few words, introduce yourself and say a few words about NRC IRAP? Or is somebody else from there?
So I am here.
Yes.
And I don't know why you can't see me.
Sorry, and I put you a bit on the spot here.
Hang on, I'm just turning on my... Okay, it works. Hey, IT works. I'm off again. Okay, so I know quite a few faces here, and a few I don't recognize, but happy to see you all here. I'm Cliff. I'm an ITA from Energy IRAP based out of Pacific. And we are very happy that Foresight's able to deliver this program. I think this is year 5 or year 6, Nina. I can't recall, but
I'm
it's
not sure.
we are here in support of Foresight and all the SMEs to kind of grow this sector. So if you don't have an ITA or a CEA, do reach out to Nina. We'll sort it out. But keep talking with your IRAP representative. There's programming all the time that's available to you as we roll into some interesting times.
Yes, thank you so much, Cliff. Thank you for being here and for all your support. We really appreciate it. And with that, we would like to start today's panel discussion. We can go to the next slide, and I would like to introduce you to our 4 fantastic speakers. The first one is Chaya Chengapa. She's the program manager at Partners in Project Green. It's a program initiated by Toronto Pearson and the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority. Partners in Project Green helps individual organizations and the region to become more sustainable. So they provide operational support and tools that lower costs, increase reach, and guide members into the new net zero economy. So they operate in 4 areas: energy performance, waste division, water stewardship, and engagement. And Chaya is passionate about community building and supporting innovative solutions, specifically in water and waste, to mobilize climate action. And she has a wealth of experience engaging diverse stakeholders to design and deliver environmental programs. Chaya, thank you so much for being here. Our second speaker is Lloyd Hippel. He's the operations director at Enviro Stewards. And Enviro Stewards has been around for more than 20 years, and they have been integrating corporate sustainability into business operations. So they take a holistic approach to consultation, assessment, and implementation, and they really focus on prevention, resource conservation, and identifying affordable, sustainable solutions that decarbonize facilities and supply chains. And Lloyd is a professional engineer. He has been involved in local and international development projects, and he can share a wealth of expertise when it comes to working with large manufacturers and facilities on their water management plans and some tech adoption. So, Lloyd, thank you for being here. And then we have 2 speakers from Hazen and Sawyer. Hazen helps clients to address water supply and water quality challenges with solutions tailored to deliver the communities they serve. And on their website, they say all things water. And when I was looking through their projects, I think they really live up to that quote. They have projects in drinking water, wastewater, PFAS, water reuse, and so many more. So I'm really excited for Bob and Stephanie to be here today. Bob serves as the group leader for Hazen's Industrial Water Group. His expertise is providing water and environmental solutions for industrial clients with experience in all major industrial sectors. And Stephanie is Hazen's Director of Integrated Resource Technologies and a regional leader for the firm's water reuse practice and sustainability services group. So she specializes in the evaluation of water supply, water and wastewater treatment, and effluent management options using multi-criteria decision analysis. So there's lots of knowledge here, lots of wealth of knowledge. So Evan, he's our moderator today. He's a strategic advisor for WaterNEXT, and I'm excited to give the microphone to you to start this panel discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Nina. And thanks, everybody. Good day, everybody. I just want to add as an additional sort of housekeeping note off the top that this is really, if you've been here before, you'll know that I'd really like this to be a conversation, right? It's not a scripted, presentation or anything to that effect. So please feel free to raise your digital hand at any point, and I'll watch for that to pop up, because sometimes your questions are really related to where we are in the conversation and maybe an interesting point that you want to hammer home. So feel free to do that. It won't be a big issue. I'll allow for the interruption when we find the right spot, and I'll try to keep an eye on that. I'll also keep an eye on the chat, but that'll probably mean the Q&A will shift to the end because it's easier to to read through those when we get a chance. So anyway, feel free to do that. Turn on your camera, introduce yourself. It's great for everyone in here to know who's here and to learn about your company. So it's never a concern. Today, we're focused on how water technology can provide solutions for challenges in the built environment, right? And we're fortunate, as Nina says, to have 4 colleagues here who will share their insight on this topic. So panelists, as you know, the audience today is made up of people who are concerned with problem solving, right? So on their behalf, and including myself, because I work in water technology in a variety of organizations, I want to say that I really appreciate your time and your willingness to share your insights. So hopefully we'll get a chance to pull out some of your unique perspectives on this. So I'm going to let, as Nina said, our speakers introduce themselves briefly, their organization. And starting with you, Lloyd, if you don't mind, I'll put you in the hot seat here. And then we'll go to Chaya and Stephanie and Bob. We'll try to follow in that rough order. Lloyd, if you could take a minute and describe your organization and your role within, and then if you're willing, feel free to share some kind of key water challenges that you typically work on.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Evan. It's nice to see you again. It's been a while since we've connected.
Yeah.
Thanks for the introduction, Nina, and to everybody else on the panel and the audience. So yeah, I'm from Enviro Stewards. We're located in the Waterloo area in Ontario, and we work mainly with manufacturers. Our largest sector is food and beverage, but we also do commercial and institutional facilities as well. And we like to say that we help build resilient businesses, and we do that by doing mainly energy and water efficiency assessments. And if a company has greenhouse gas targets they need to reach, we can also help them achieve those. So I've been with the company 18 years now, so quite a while. And my main area of work has been in water conservation. So we've worked with a lot of the Ontario municipalities. They have water conservation programs of various sorts, and we've helped them implement those and do water audits. So quite a bit of experience there. And what we do is when we go into facility, whether it's water, energy, whatever it is we're trying to look at, is we try to get a really good feel for the baseline. So measuring things is really key for us. We get an overview of their processes, where things are moving, but then we start clamping on flow meters. So we use like ultrasonic flow meters, clamp on meters that read the pulse. We use amp loggers. Anywhere we think we can collect data, we try to collect it. Then we take that data, analyze it, and figure out where most of the water is being used. So I'll specifically focus on water for this context, because that's the main theme of this get together. But we would try to do a Pareto analysis. So what are the top 3 water consumers in your facility? And is there anything that you can do to reduce or eliminate that water use? And then we come up with a roster of opportunities. Here are 5 things you can do at these different processes or points of production. And this is what we think it'll save. And this is the capital cost. And here's a business case for doing so. And then once we come up with that, we also work on implementation. So making sure that it's just not a report that gets put on a shelf, but things get actually done and implemented. And we've developed a program called Stewie. It's an online dashboard to help track what those savings are. So it sort of uses, this goes beyond my technical ability, but APIs from these various meters to go to the cloud and into Stewie. And we have a programmer who's able to make really neat figures and displays. So that's a new tool we've been developing just to help get remote insight into what's going on in a facility. We try to get minute by minute data whenever possible, and we collect that, monitor it, and it helps us make sure, hey, here's where we said you're going to get, here's where you are, is it off or on target? If it's off target, okay, let's explore what's going on. Maybe something's installed incorrectly or we can tweak it. Or if you're on target, great, what else can we look at for saving water or energy, whatever it is? So we do a lot of work in Canada, across Canada, and quite a bit in the US as well. So we're working with about 6 or 7 Unilever facilities in the States. Similar context, we're using water. Energy really ties into water with us because hot water, is often always used in facilities, especially food and beverage. There's a lot of greenhouse gases tied into that hot water use. So if you can reduce your hot water use, automatically reduce natural gas consumption or electricity, as well as your greenhouse gas emissions. So you said brief. I'm not sure if that was brief or long, but I had to go first.
It was great. And you know what? I could, Lloyd, you and I have met in the past, and I have a personal interest in data collection and sensors and getting information for people to make good decisions. And so I think a lot of people on this call have that interest in common. So I'm sure you're speaking the right language here. This is great. So thank you. And Chaya, if you don't mind, I'll come to you next, because on a tone separate but completely related to the idea of technology integration, it's the engagement with a variety of stakeholders to make these projects happen. And I wondered if you could introduce yourself and your work, because I know you're really on the front lines in that respect.
Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you for inviting me to this panel discussion. I am a program manager at Partners in Project Green, which is a program of the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, and I lead PPG's waste management and water stewardship programs. A quick introduction to PPG. I know Nina did provide some information. We were launched in 2008 in collaboration with the Toronto Pearson Airport, as well as municipal partners, which is the region of Peel, Toronto, and York. And we primarily work with businesses and very closely with our municipal partners to collectively advance social and environmental sustainability across the Greater Toronto area. And the focus of PPG's water stewardship programs is to support actions to manage stormwater sustainably and to build flood resilience and heat resilience while protecting and conserving our freshwater resources through pollution prevention and conservation. So as Evan mentioned, we work at that interface of working with communities, and at PPG, it's primarily with our business members, with business partners and municipalities. And I'm sure we're all aware of the impacts of climate change and how extreme weather events are becoming more severe. So flooding also poses a significant threat to homeowners and businesses in Ontario. So our corporate flood and heat risk management program, which is in partnership with the Sustainable Technologies Evaluation Program, or STEP, educates and supports industrial, commercial, and institutional members to focus on green infrastructure and low impact development as potential solutions. So we're looking at nature-based solutions just to help reduce runoff into stormwater drains and into buildings and improving water quality. But our focus is also on the host of co-benefits that come with this practice. I can share more on some of the challenges that we face as we proceed through this discussion.
Great, and thank you. And I think there are several people on this call who are from the sort of Southern Ontario region, and they'd be familiar with Partners in Project Green and the TRCA, and we're probably fairly excited to hear and learn more about how your projects get off the ground and who you work with, because it's a really interesting sort of low impact development. You've really built a reputation for your group in that respect. So thanks for joining us.
I just wanted to add that Enviro Stewards is a long-standing PPG member, so it's great to have Lloyd as a co-panelist.
Yeah, that's great. Stephanie, if you don't mind, I'll go to you next, and we can learn a little bit about your work.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. As everybody else has already said, thank you very much for the opportunity to join you today. My name is Stephanie Ishii. I'm joined by my colleague, Bob Weintraut. We're both from Hazen and Sawyer, which is an engineering firm that is a North American firm, so both in US and Canada. And as Nina mentioned, we really cover the entire envelope of water-related concerns. So whether that is water supply planning, effluent management planning, to the actual treatment technologies selections and the operation of those technologies. And as you might imagine, oftentimes working with both industrial and municipal clients on really characterizing and articulating the current regulatory environment, the current public sentiment, but then also those potential conditions for the future, because everything that we're helping to design and implement generally has a 25, 50, 75, 100-year lifespan. So we're not just dealing with today, but the potential future. And with respect to this conversation, something that Bob and I talk about quite often is really the importance of thinking about these potential technologies and these potential solutions that you all are really familiar with in the site-specific context and the community-specific context. And that comes from everything to the actual stakeholder identification, to how do you communicate the benefits of these technologies, to also potentially thinking about the system implications of those technologies beyond the primary objective. And so that's really what a lot of Bob and I collaborate on, is trying to make sure that these are really site-specific solutions that are being proposed. And, Evan, I think you started off the questioning with if we could articulate to some of the primary challenges that we're seeing and how new technologies fit in. And I would say for me personally, I focus a lot on water reuse and effluent management planning, mostly from my work from the municipal side, but of course, those that are using that water oftentimes are on the industrial side. And so one of the challenges we see is how do you transparently communicate the water quality expectations of the user and the water quality realities of the effluent supply, but then also what's going to come back to that water reclamation facility from that industrial user, and making sure that there's a mutual understanding of each other's objectives, constraints, and flexibility. So not only can I provide you reclaimed water for your industrial purpose, but can I also accept your discharge in a way that's not going to have pass-through or interference challenges with my treatment technologies on the municipal side, and actually end up inhibiting my ability to give you reclaimed water. So as you might imagine, it's a lot of relationship building, a lot of information sharing, and making sure everyone's aware of what people can change and what people can't change to achieve the objectives that they're aiming to do. And if it's okay, Evan, Bob and I are both coming from the same firm, but as I mentioned, I tend to work more on the municipal side, and Bob is more on the industrial side. So slightly different perspectives on those challenges.
Absolutely. And something that I appreciate, and if anyone else on this call has been to any of these seminars with me in the past, you touched on a topic that's near and dear to my heart, which is sort of the importance of communication to include, data technology integration doesn't happen by accident. It's through, integration into projects where it fits appropriately through people like yourself and some of your stakeholders. And I'm sure everyone on this call is looking forward to digging into how technology gets into your projects. So we'll follow up with you on that topic in a minute, and I'll just turn it over to your colleague, Bob.
So one of my favorite quotes is from George Bernard Shaw. And his quote is that the illusion of communication is that it actually occurs. And I think that happens a lot in the context of technology and circularity. I have spent almost 40 years working with industrial clients, working with them on solving their water and environmental challenges. And it was great to hear Lloyd's introduction, because many times on the industrial side, they're very data poor. And what we're seeing is now Stephanie and I regularly come into the middle in kind of this nexus between industry and municipal or other governmental groups. And they may be data rich, but they're knowledge poor. And so a lot of the opportunity, as Stephanie mentioned, is to really look at that context, make sure that we're really communicating. For example, municipalities are very data rich on understanding flow and organic strength and nutrients and things like that, none of which industry really cares about when they're thinking about reuse. They're thinking about hardness and alkalinity and corrosion and things like that. And so, getting to the point where you can make sure that you're solving the right problem requires that you're really being transparent, you're communicating openly, you're taking the time to establish a design basis and thinking about, what does project success really look like. Then you can drop to technology. And I think that it's very easy in the water space, where the majority of us are either engineers or scientists, we tend to go to technology first. And I think it's really important to do that context setting first and get the data and extract the knowledge from it. And then we can, get to the technology and figure out which technologies are going to be the right fit to solve that right problem.
This, it's interesting. And thanks, Bob. I think you've probably sparked the curiosity of a few people in this audience, the people I know at least, and myself, because I'm wondering, maybe I'll open this I'll start with you, Lloyd, because everyone here has touched on the importance of data collection, reporting, using data for management, for actual management, not just getting information for information's sake, but actually converting that into actionable, disciplined response that provides an outcome that's expected and meaningful for your clients or your stakeholders. And I wondered, you were really, I'm familiar with your work. having done similar work in the past and with you. Could you tell me, knowing that you use so much technology, how do you find and vet and test the technology you're working with? You've been working with your company for so many years. Is it just the same company, same tech, and you've just, you're all comfortable, you got a good working relationship? That's important. But do you validate, do you test, where do you go to find new technology insights to bring to your practice?
Yeah, so we do have vendors we buy from typically for our water metering specifically. So there's a company in Waterloo that manufactures the clamp-on type meters that can remotely send the signal automatically. And then there's also ultrasonic flow meters, which are, I guess I'll call them dumb because they don't connect anything online. So they're more, you set them up, let them run for a week, you come back and it logs the data, and then you export that data to a laptop and analyze it from there. So that's one area that we're hoping to maybe advance a bit more, because there are all sorts of devices on the market to plug in and send a signal, but it's very convoluted and I'm not sure how reliable they are. Because if you don't have a meter to clamp on one of the clamp-on meters, there are fewer options. So sometimes we just recommend they install an inline meter that's compatible with the clamp-on meter, but then that requires that pipe to be, shut down, cut, install the meter, and put the clamp-on on. Whereas like the ultrasonic and clamp-ons don't require any change to the process. You can go in any day, doesn't matter how busy they are. You just put it on and you're collecting data. And with both our vendors, they've been pretty good. Like we've had issues before where one of the meters wasn't recording data for whatever reason, and they were able to remotely reset it and then said, yeah, it looks like it's recording data again. We verified that it was. So we sort of just put our trust in their hands for how valid the data is. And sometimes there's stuff that happens on site. You can't control. People, for whatever reason, see a plug on the wall and just unplug it. Thank you. We go back and our battery's dead. There's no data. So that's happened many times. But I think also then once we get the data, just does the data make sense? We have had issues where meters are getting data, but maybe it was programmed incorrectly. The wrong diameter was input when you're programming it. And these numbers don't look right for this type of application. So like I think Bob was describing before, you have the data, but then you need to apply knowledge to that data. You just don't take it black and white. Yes, this is the answer. You need to have some sort of human interpretation of this data. Does this flow rate actually make sense? Does this daily volume make sense for this? Yes, it does. Okay, you can start working with that data. If it doesn't make sense, you got to go back and figure out what went wrong and how to get that accurate data. So yeah, I think from collecting the data, equipment's very reliable, but we're always open to new options for doing that, especially remotely now when you want the minute-by-minute consumption sort of to come into people's desktops and into figures. And then making sure that data is accurate, but also validating it through a human. So we try not to just rely on our dashboard on Stewie. We have a human looking at it as well, saying, does this data make sense that it's spitting out? So that's one of the big dangers with technology, is that you could just be looking at all this data, but if there's no insight or human intelligence, not necessarily AI, but a human looking at it, sometimes you can miss things. So don't know if that answers your question, but
no, that's great. And in fact, I can see people's heads nodding, because a lot of people are in the business of providing technology and then some form of enterprise system for keeping their clients informed. And I think this rings some bells. And in fact, Stephanie, if you don't mind, well, Stephanie and Bob, I'll start with you, Stephanie, but related to Lloyd's comments, you work with a similar client base in that they're industrial clients seeking water-related insights or management capabilities or control. And I wonder, are you finding your clients are asking you to bring technology recommendations, or is it driven by your company's needs to manage effectively that you're implementing technology and sharing certain data and analysis only? Are your clients hungry for that data so they can manage themselves, or are they looking for the analysis that Lloyd is talking about, where there's an interpretation level and that insight is actionable, so that's the level they want? Or are they getting into that sort of data level and they're asking for that from you?
So I'll answer on behalf of municipal clients on my perspective, and then I think Bob can speak more on the industrial side. But I would say from a municipal perspective, counties, cities, communities, we think about municipal clients certainly as being risk adverse, and as they should be, considering they're the stewards of ratepayer funds. But with that said, I would say they are absolutely wanting, hungry, looking for new technologies with respect to data collection, data visualization, data interpretation, but also the treatment technologies themselves. It's just that the burden of proof is very high in order to be adopted by that municipal entity. And so, as I mentioned before, that regulatory uncertainty and these increasing pressures on municipalities to hit a much wider range of water quality considerations as well as water reliability considerations means that your understanding of the system has to go up with those increasing requirements. So not just in terms of, monthly end of pipe sampling, but also making sure that each of your control points within your facilities is performing as intended, minute in and minute out. And so with that, you need your online sensors, you need not to have a requirement for everyone to watch in those individual sensors every day and say, oh, yep, that's above our target. They need alarms, they need support to say that these things are trending in a certain way together that's indicative of a challenge or indicative of a maintenance need or whatever that might be. And so I would say that absolutely the desire is there for better data management, better data visualization, but in order to really adopt a new technology, they need to feel very confident that it's going to be well worth the burden of adapting and learning and training themselves on a new technology before taking it in-house. And so sometimes that's where we might come into play as consultants to say, all right, well, let's do this as a pilot. Again, on the treatment side, as well as on the data side, work with a technology provider, a vendor to say, let's do a low risk pilot study or pilot implementation of this technology to really show how it works day in, day out, what you're going to experience as an operator, where you're going to have challenges, how you're going to address those challenges before it gets put in full scale.
And you touched on a topic there that makes some people kind of cringe, and maybe Bob, you can share this, that this low risk small sample sort of pilot test. Bob, do you have clients also hoping for pilot demonstrations and tests? Is that the realm you work in as well for getting projects off the ground, or are your industrial clients pre-sold, ready to work?
Industry is very business driven. It's all about return on investment, and even looking at compliance type projects, they'll still look at the economics and trying to drive efficiency. Having said that, industry has really jumped to the forefront, not necessarily the environmental side, but they use machine learning, AI, things like that. It's becoming very common that they're looking at applying that into their production processes. And so you might get into, say, in the process industries, they may be using it a lot on maintenance and things like that, looking at how do we instrument around rotating equipment so that we start to sense months in advance where there's maybe a micro vibration, and start to learn from when you see that, at what point do you need to be looking at replacement or rebalancing or whatever to try to avoid that major investment of a motor failure and things like that. They're already there. They're already thinking about it. Like refineries have started to use these digital tools to really improve operational efficiency. Their feedstocks are very constant and things like that. So they've had a lot of success in getting their processes to be more efficient. Environmentally, it's really hard. You look at wastewater, for example, and applying some of these tools to a wastewater treatment system, and wastewater, to be a little crude, it's a dog's breakfast of stuff. You end up at the wastewater plant, you end up with whatever somebody on each shift throws down the sewer. And sometimes that can be constant and consistent, and sometimes it's apples and elephants. And so it's been a little harder to bring, even if you talk to a lot of the major vendors, the Xylems and Veolias and folks, they're struggling a bit to figure out what some of those digital solutions are that they can bring into the industrial space. But we're trying, and we are starting to apply, some of the multivariate analysis tools, of trying to extract more knowledge out of the data. Because 20 years ago, people started putting in SCADA systems, and they've got scads of data. They've got 1 minute data of all these different devices, but they don't know how to extract knowledge out of it. And I think that's where Stephanie and I were talking about this yesterday to get ready. A lot of the technology providers that come to the table, they've got a little part of something, and they figured out a really powerful way to bring it, but it's not all the way to a solution yet. And so that's one of the things I think holds up getting to the pilot test phase. We do pilot testing all the time, but it tends to be more macro level pilot testing around the process. But getting to the point where they're comfortable to bring new digital technology becomes a little more challenging, because it just, how do you fit it into the context of a solution versus just deploying a technology? If that makes sense.
It does. And, the challenge, so there are lots of comments in here, and I'll see if I can address some of the sort of comments that have come up or questions to a degree around pilots. That piloting is, it's a thorn in everyone's side, but it's the critical path to demonstration, right? Demonstrating the effective deployment of some solution and giving people a chance to touch and feel, right? And the challenge always comes up with who pays for it, right? Who's going to pay for this pilot? Do you find that there are, pilots are easily paid for? Or I guess, Chaya, if you don't mind, I'll bring you in on this question, because I think the critical value of a pilot is, again, that demonstration, the chance for your clients to feel confident, the chance for something to be integrated that will be mutually beneficial, help the project get ahead. And something I think Partners in Project Green has always done well that isn't often brought up in these types of discussions is the importance of community engagement and almost, I don't know if this is too soft a word, but like celebration of successful implementation, successful project completion. In your low impact development work, do you place a lot of emphasis on the importance of demonstration, getting stakeholders out there, getting people to feel things? Is this an undervalued part of this equation?
Certainly, I think green infrastructure practices are still perceived as an emerging technology, right? So there is a limited track record. So pilots and demonstration sites will always help. But then we do have some very good pilots and case studies already available. The challenge that we are facing with implementation is the adoption, is that whole return on investment discussion. It's very difficult to communicate that return on investment for low impact development and green infrastructure in the way a business would want to accept that information in terms of dollars. So we really have to focus on the co-benefits. So it's not just the stormwater runoff reduction and money saved, but it's the whole improvement of water quality, the costly flooding events that you might be able to prevent in the future, reduction of urban heat island effect, the whole biodiversity and natural habitat that you create, as well as physical well-being and mental well-being of your employees as well on site. So that's the challenge we're facing. So we do have good pilots, we've got good case studies, but with the challenges that each case study is different. So green infrastructure for businesses is on a case-to-case on-site basis. So you have to do an assessment, you have to understand the site requirements before you can suggest the best available solution. So that's the challenge we are facing, communicating the return on investment and making and creating that knowledge, which I think Bob brought out. There's a lack of knowledge as well as capacity.
So the actual quantification of that value is that, as you say,
yes, it's the actual quantification, as well as there's a lack of long-term performance data as well. There's evaluation, but then you still need a lot more in terms of maintenance, long-term maintenance costs. So these are questions that come up, which sometimes it's difficult to answer and convince members. We try our best with a lot of information. We have free modules that are available, technical modules that are available. We have site assessments that we provide free of cost in a lot of cases, as well as we're trying to see what other incentives we could provide to get projects on the ground.
And that's interesting, Chaya. Thank you. Considering the people who are on this call are usually technology providers that have this component of a larger picture that they would like to contribute? And would it be beneficial for you as a sort of project host and a project initiator, if you're being approached by technology providers, for them to maybe emphasize their ROI, their return on investment value from, certain metrics? I mean, is that something that you would find helps grease the wheels, helps make their integration or inclusion in projects easier if they came to you with that kind of value add to their pitch?
We don't necessarily use a lot of third-party technology. I mean, there's some pre-treatment devices that we use, but it's a lot to do with on-site implementation, right? So it's the design, it's how do you communicate the flow of water, the amount of water that would be reduced, the flow rate that would be reduced, and how that would help save them costs in the future from flooding, perhaps. But certainly that would help. What is important is to also, I think, provide the value of the overall to the community at large. That's the approach we're taking. So it's not just about your own business property or the on-site implications of these actions that you take, but what are the implications to the community around you and downstream. So that value is what would be very, I think, critical to get more businesses looking at this.
That's interesting.
Evan,
And,
can I add on just a little bit of industrial perspective to that?
Of course, please.
Because I was sitting here going, I totally agree.
Yeah.
And I've been involved with industrial implementations, and it's really adjacent to low impact development or natural treatment systems.
Yeah.
And they can be highly efficient and highly cost effective, but they're very bespoke. They need to be customized to that industry's specifics. They can work in a lot of different environments. They can work in really cold climates, designed correctly, and they almost always require pilots. And it's hard to get people to acknowledge that. Like getting that long-term data that Chaya mentioned is challenging, but they can be, for smaller systems and small loads and things like that, they can be highly cost effective. And as she mentioned, that like community benefits, the analog to that is natural resource advantages. A lot of times you're creating habitat, in a highly disturbed area. And so I want to like add on and say I totally agree with what Chaya would say.
That's great, Bob. And you raised a point, you used the word sort of ancillary, beside, it's kind of a complementary to the primary task at hand. But Lloyd, in your introduction, you had mentioned something that I think ties into this discussion, in that, getting that ROI calculation, getting people to appreciate the value of something that may seem very subjective. You've tied in the topic of energy to your water-related work, and I'm guessing that Bob and Stephanie, you do as well. I'm not sure about you, Chaya, from a technical side, but energy seems to motivate the cost of energy, the cost of operating facilities. Usually the energy-related ROI is what motivates many sort of, I guess, industrial clients. In your case, Lloyd, have you found that that's the language they want to speak in when you're trying to drive or motivate someone to participate in some of your work?
Yeah, I think so. And energy increasingly, because as I mentioned, is the greenhouse gas implications. Like natural gas is usually by far the biggest environmental footprint in terms of greenhouse gas equivalents. Water is fairly small, but like I said, you tie in energy, it can really increase the water contribution. But yeah, I think energy is a big one now, just because people have sustainability targets that they need to hit. And now they have to figure out how they're going to get there. They've said it, now they have to actually do it. And looking at energy first is a great way to do that. But even water is becoming increasingly top of mind. Like in Ontario, at least the water rates is each year 5, 6, or 7% increase in cost. And so we'll often get inquiries from companies who said, yeah, we just need to do a water conservation assessment. Or some of the municipal programs will offer a free water audit. Or Toronto actually has a separate rate that companies pay if they do a water conservation plan that's approved by the city. So in that case, they hire a consultant to come in, do the assessment, send it to the city, they approve it, then they get, I think it's like 30% discount on their water rate. So it's a significant savings for any facility in the Toronto area. And yeah, energy is a big one, but I think water's getting up there. I think people realize just the water is one of those things that has intrinsic value, not just the cost associated with it, but it, you know, the cleanliness and what you're discharging from your facility as well. And sometimes with water, especially food and beverage, they're a little bit leery of conservation because you know what happens when you reduce you reduce your water use, your concentration of your sewer bylaw parameters increase. And so often they're paying a surcharge to the municipality for having, you know, extra strength wastewater that they're sending to them. And they're afraid if we save water, those are gonna go up. We're gonna get charged more. It's gonna be very expensive. And so what we've been able to do working with the municipalities to demonstrate this is that they will go up, but compared to the savings from water reductions, it actually is a net savings at the end of the day. So each municipality has a formula for how they calculate your surcharge. So you can input what your current parameters are, what your current water consumption is, and then do a scenario. If we reduce by 10%, 20%, 30% of our water, you can calculate what it will look like in terms of the surcharge increase. And most of the time, it's always a net savings when you save water. So that's one way we get sort of over that hurdle, if that's the objection to wanting to do water conservation. And then some of those programs also allow us to do, Chai mentioned pollution prevention. So that's reduction at source. So instead of just focusing on the treatment, end of pipe treatment, we look at, well, where is that getting to the drain in the first place? And so for food and beverage, what's going to the drain, it's something you've purchased or something that you want in a bottle and sold to your customer. You don't want to be paying to destroy it in your wastewater treatment system or sending it down your sewer and increasing your concentration. So some of the programs have allowed that coupling with the water, looking at ways to reduce loading at source as well, because then you get the effect of reducing those concentrations from the beginning, sort of the root cause of where they're coming from. And that's another way to get companies a bit more excited about water conservation. So there are many ways you can do it because, like I say, water just ties into everything. So you can always find a way to sort of demonstrate the benefits of looking at water as part of a larger assessment. So even if they just want energy, we always try to say, look, we're doing your energy, but we want to look at your water as well. You know, we're there anyways. The incremental cost to actually do it with the energy assessment is not significant. So let's just look at everything, get a really holistic view of where your utilities are being used at your facility. And then because of that, you have more data to look at, you have more opportunities that can come out of that data.
You raised something in there that I would like to make note of for future seminars, that I think it would be great if we could have a session just on how to motivate people to be, you know, prospective clients to be interested in water related projects. You know, just there's such a suite of different approaches that people take just to get people excited about the topic and motivate them to get involved. And Stephanie, if you don't mind, I just wanted to ask your municipal clients, I mean, are they lining up, or are you trying to motivate them? And what do you find, like, do you approach municipalities one by one? Is there some way that you're getting their attention for water related projects?
No, I mean, on a municipal perspective, water is top of mind, and particularly with respect to the industrial intersection, because oftentimes water is not one of those primary siting considerations for an industry. So, you know, they're looking at a whole suite of other factors that inform where they might want to site, and then water becomes potentially a later conversation, which is challenging from the municipal perspective, but they certainly want to get to a point of yes, right? They want to say, we want to support you in terms of water and wastewater services, but we really need to better understand the temporal variability of your demands, the type of things that you might be discharging, and how is there some potential conflict or alignment with how we already run our facilities. And so I would say water from a municipal perspective, we do not have to convince them to look at, that's already there. I think the thing that we're really trying to help them see is, this is, maybe you have one primary objective in mind. For example, maybe a municipality is concerned with a certain perfluorinated compound. We'll try to help them see how technology selection might lend itself to that primary objective, but also maybe how to make sure it's protecting you against some other aligned or co-benefits along the way. So whether it's you know, potential future regulations, or even I've seen some some comments in here about greenhouse gas emissions, and Lloyd spoke to this as well. That is certainly an increasing topic of conversation within the municipal space, particularly on the wastewater side, is how to better quantify the CO2 and N2O coming off of their biological processes, and if there are opportunities to reduce those emissions through technology selection. And so if you can help to see, like, yes, you've got a regulatory driver, but there could be other co-benefits or co-considerations to go within that technology selection space. That's the kind of broader spectrum I feel like we're oftentimes trying to make sure comes to the table as part of the alternatives analysis.
This is great, and I can see that some of our comments. I'm going to turn the mic over, if you will, to see if anyone in the crowd would like to turn off the camera, introduce themselves, because there are several questions that kind of touch on what you just raised, Stephanie, and I wondered if anyone might like to introduce themselves and raise their hand to bring up a question before I carry on.
I have a question.
Please.
Hi, my name is Martha White. I'm the CEO of RLCore Technologies, and what we're doing is looking at using real-time optimization to improve operations of water treatment and wastewater treatment facilities. And there, the goal is to reduce energy use, reduce chemical use. Ultimately, to save on cost, but of course, there's an environmental flavor to that as well. And our focus is on a machine learning, data-driven based approach. And so my question here is, whenever you come in with these new digital solutions, each site is very custom. They're on a range of from a much older site to a much newer site where it's easier or harder to integrate. Everyone has different cybersecurity rules. So I'm sort of curious, but when you're trying to bring in these newer technologies, how do you deal with this change management? Is this world becoming a little bit more uniform, or is it going to stay custom for quite some time?
Is there someone in particular you would like to have answer that question, Martha, that you've even? If not, we can.
Whoever wants to jump to that. I said a lot of things, so whoever wants to respond to anything.
I think industrially it's very bespoke, to be honest. I mean, you know, each large industry has its own architecture and backbone of how it's built up its information systems. You know, and they some use SAP, some are using Oracle, some are using, you know, different proprietary hardware platforms. You know, there's so many intersections that I think it will continue to be pretty bespoke. I like what you said around change management, because I think for a lot of industry, management of change is going to drive a lot of the implementation because of, you know, it could be process risks, it could be cybersecurity, things like that. There's just so many pieces and parts, and that's going to slow implementation. But I think it's going to be pretty bespoke.
That's great, and it's a bit frustrating, right? Because you have so many systems you adapt to or bring solutions for. It can be challenging as a tech developer to aim to the biggest possible audience. So I can imagine that challenge. I see additional hands. Len, I think your hand was up next. I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I'm scanning through the group here.
Hi, Len Bland from Nanogas Environmental. We clean dirty water with tiny bubbles. And so I'm just curious what, several people have talked about natural treatment, and I'm curious what what that entails. Does that mean, using air, oxygen, or something else instead of chemicals? Or does that mean setting up trees and water features and whatever where no mechanical systems whatever are involved?
Chaya, do you want to lead out?
Sure, I think it's the latter. The nature-based solutions, green infrastructure is more from preventing stormwater from flowing into storm drains, reducing the amount of stormwater flowing in through these planting trees. It could be rain gardens, bioretention, bioswales, etc. It's not really treatment of the water with any particular material.
I think industrially it would be things like constructed wetlands. It could be pond oriented. There's some very interesting things going on around larger ponds and using literally floating islands of various plant species, and it's kind of a mix of the plants that are uptaking things as well as there's treatment that occurs with bacteria and algae and, you know, this whole mix of things. And so I think that's more of what I think of when I think about natural treatment systems.
I hope that helps, Len.
Yeah, that really helps. Just a little bit of a nuance on that. You know, certain bacterias can help plants grow, as well as when they flow into water, they're regenerative, so they help the water instead of harming it. So they can replace fertilizer. Is that part of what you focus on?
And you may be speaking about, you know, biostimulants and so on in the sort of horticulture space. There is a lot of that work as well.
Yeah. You know, so let's have an example. Golf courses can struggle with, you know, bad water coming off their courses, stinky ponds, etc. And that's created a lot of times by fertilizer runoff that they're putting in there on their golf course. And sometimes it's created by municipal water, reuse water flowing in that still has BOD, right? So then sometimes if you can replace that with that regenerative bacteria, can help solve the problem. And so I'm curious whether that's a consideration for any of you.
The right constructed wetland can be a fantastic resource for just what you mentioned, because they get carbon consumption. They, you know, to grow the plants, you know, they're plus or minus 10% nitrogen. So they'll take up a lot of ammonia and urea. They'll take up, you know, 1 to 2% phosphorus. So they, you know, the downside is they take space. The upside is they're passive and require very minimal. I mean, there's some management. You got to take the phosphorus out of the system at some point, sometimes, but they can be great. And they do not take the place of active treatment, you know, of using things like, you know, your nanobubble technologies and flotation and aeration, you know, all that absolutely has its place. It's just, that's part of the providing context to pick the right technology, whether an active or passive solution gives you the best value.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay,
Nina, yeah.
Okay, Evan, you go. You
No,
wrap
go
it-
ahead.
No, you wrap it up, then I can say the final words.
Great. You know, this is this is the worst part of actually my job, I think, is that I think, you know, as we get into this conversation, more and more questions arise. I really hope we can encourage participation throughout. I'm going to have to suggest that the questions that remain, if you could send them to Nina, and from the chat, we're going to direct them, if you don't mind, to our panel for their answers in the future. They can do it offline and send you some responses, and perhaps they'll be willing to let you connect directly through Nina, and she'll share some information. And at this point, I just want to thank everyone for participating and turn it over to Nina.
Yes, I think that's a great idea, Evan. And if the speakers are fine with that, I would be happy to make those connections for the remaining questions. And I would also like to thank you so much for joining today's session. It was really interesting. I think I've learned a lot myself as well. I think the pilot discussion was very interesting. And we would like to wrap it up here. There is one more or two more things I would like to share with you. In an hour, we'll have a new webinar series that we just launched last week, the Future Proofing Canada webinar series. It's a response to what's happening in the world right now, and how we can support our innovators, how we can get together and learn from each other to tackle the uncertain future right now. So this is a weekly webinar. I put the link in the chat if you're interested. Today we have sector-specific discussions, one being on water. And then the next technical showcase will be on March 12th. Please keep an eye on your email. We'll share the topic and the panelists for that next session in March. And with that, a big thank you to the speakers. Thank you to Evan for moderating it and for the active participation of the participants in the chat. And Cliff, I've seen you answered a lot of questions, so thank you for that as well. And with that, have a nice afternoon.